So welcome everybody. We're really happy to have you. I'm going to be super fast. Alison Tenner. I'm one of the co-facilitators here and very happy to have our wonderful list of panelists. I'll let Manola, who is one of our founders, say hello, and then we'll pass off to Patricia, who will lead.
So, hi everybody. Hi to all the lovely speakers, to the two co-facilitators of today. It's a big joy to have you here. I'm also particularly happy to celebrate the fourth event of Hacking HR Luxembourg and Friends, and there's no one else I would rather celebrate it with. So thank you. Um, just for a very quick introduction, so Hacking HR is a global community. It operates via a network of city-based chapters. Please feel free to check us out on hackinghr.io. Please feel free to reach out to Alison, Patricia, or myself for any further information. Connect with us on LinkedIn. You will get heads up on all our future events. This is an open community for like-minded and like-hearted people where we share the good, bad, and ugly of our everyday experiences within our work life and life. We strongly believe we cannot really separate those two. And what we want to role model is how we show up as our true selves in all our interactions. Enjoy Today is about diversity and inclusion, a topic very near and dear to all our hearts. The fact that we are here, I believe, is a statement of our own commitment. And I hope we will take out of today hope and ideas and a sense of belonging. Enjoy. I'm also very happy. It's the first time that I'm here as a regular participant. And thank you very much, Alison and Patricia, for really stepping up into your own space. I'm terribly proud and I couldn't be more privileged. Thank you.
Hello also from my side, everyone. Good evening. Good evening, the panelists, and good evening, all the no names and the first people joining us. From my side, it's also a pleasure and an honor because Minola has invited us to join this, what I call dream of the Hacking HR. It's an open community, as I say. And right when we started discussing about the topics, I mentioned about one of my passions, which is diversity and inclusion. She said, I really would like to have one panel about it. And the whole process, it was so satisfactory to see the names, to connect with people, to talk with Jared, to Femi, to Hasiba, to know the stories, and to see so many faces here that it's becoming, it's really a community. So all of these faces that we already know. And again, it's a pleasure to share this a bit more of 1 hour with all of you. And the show is to all of us. It's not just us. So feel free to interact. We kindly ask you to keep muted whenever you're not speaking, but of course, feel free to unmute, to turn on your camera, to speak, to challenge the panelists, right? I don't want to tease you guys, but you are here to be teased, to be challenged. And if you allow me, then I would like to say the quick bios of our amazing set of panelists today. And as Minola said, so this is our fourth panel. And the idea is to discuss today the driving benefits through diversity and inclusion and how belonging adds value to the bottom line. And starting with Emmanuel Verhagen, I trained to pronounce it correctly, her name.
Well done.
Their name. So it's a diversity consultant and coach. They are located in Belgium, really close to us, so practically our neighbors. And they firmly believe that everyone has the right to be happy, always. This belief led them to focus their energy on forging inclusion for diversity by creating meaningful conversations and humanizing business systems. Their quest for inclusion led them to become a trained and certified leadership coach, working primarily with people navigating transitions. Born with an intersex body and having lived through a series of so-called normalizing operations, They advocate for intersex human rights to eradicate a still ongoing practice of genital mutilation while pointing towards the celebration of bodily diversity. Welcome, Manuel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Then we have Femi Odelusi. He is an agile coach and scrum master, originally from Nigeria, based in the UK, and also originally a chartered accountant with expertise in financial accounting and taxation. He progressed into financial systems analysis, and from there became great at business analysis and project management. With the evolution of digital transformations in the business world, he developed an expertise as an agile practitioner. He now helps individuals, teams, leadership of organizations to achieve their goals and also help them in the digital and agile transformation journey. He loves reading books, travels, and photography, but he will get back to that soon enough with you. We have then from Luxembourg, Hasiba Gerbu. She is a head of HR, and she draws from her life story when talking about diversity and inclusion. The natural attraction to diversity is probably a patrimony of her origins. Indeed, she was born in Paris to parents originally coming from North Africa, precisely from a Berber ethnicity, who have known different civilizations since time immemorial. Her DNA tests reveals no less than 5 different ethnic backgrounds. Passionate about the humanities and social sciences, she has been working in the human resources sector since 16 years, helping strengthen the people feeling that they are at the right place, doing the right thing. Her favorite hobby, of course, traveling across the globe to meet people from different backgrounds. So I think we're all joined together in the same passion. And last but not least, we have Jared Darcy, a bit further than us. So he is a HR recruitment consultant in South Africa. Jared is an ambitious talent acquisition specialist and a bit of a coffee snob, working within a retail environment. As a people-centric individual, he is passionate about attribution and what motivates others. He lives by the quote, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts," and believes that the simplicity is key to success and happiness.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So this is our amazing set of panelists. And we would like to start then with a really teasing question. How would you define the value of D&I in a business context? We want to start with full power then here. Maybe we can start with you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, full power question. How do you define the value of D&I? I think there are two main axes for me. One would be about connection to the outside world, connecting to your market in a business term, but also about perspective. Oftentimes companies get into kind of a tunnel vision, and it does allow you to break that singular point of view of the world around us.
Who would like to follow? Femi?
Yeah, I can go. So thank you, Manuel. I resonate with that view there. For me, it's pretty much along the same lines. In the business world, there's an ethical and a moral obligation to actually ensure that we have a behavioral shift, which, if it's not addressed and put in place properly, it has a significant impact on the value of the organization. So what it translates to is that organizations have got to make sure that they get their D&I initiatives properly put in place. And once that's set, they can look towards a profitable business, ensuring that they are driving towards, high levels of profitability. Yeah.
Did you say D&I as a key principle to the start of the profitability?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, is that a question for me or?
However you guys want to go. I think Hasiba had something she wanted to add.
Yeah, maybe I can only agree with what Femi was saying. I think that the very first thing for an organization to think about prior to defining the values of D&I is why diversity, why inclusion, what's in it for me, for the organization. Giving a meaning to the agenda is crucial to succeed. And it's not talking about DNA because it has become a central topic in many organizations. It's not just about, ticking the boxes for nationality, age, gender, ethnicity. So yeah, the very first question to answer by the organization and its leader is why DNA strategy should be embedded within my business strategy. And the organization must believe, it must be convinced that D&I strategy will add value and will bring innovativity around the table. Because as we know, diversity will not bring automatically value. So we need first, to get the buy-in from everyone. And and we need a change in the beliefs, in the perception around it.
So I just want to touch on that, Asiba. I think you mentioned something great there. In terms of diversity, not just ticking the boxes. I think that's quite a powerful statement, because I think I'm sure it's very much similar in other countries, but specifically in South Africa, we've got our Employment Equity Act, which says we shall not discriminate against age, race, gender, etc., and any other arbitrary ground. And we aim to promote diversity within companies through that act. But you might find that in many cases, companies only aim to bring in individuals to tick specific boxes. But then where does that leave us? What does that mean in terms of inclusion? And as you said, we need to implement strategies that further take or take inclusion to the next step, promoting equality, allowing people a voice, to be heard, to be a part of something greater, and in so doing, promoting value in any company.
Yeah, completely. Diversity without inclusion is obviously useless. So.
And it's a very interesting point that you all brought. And it's easy to link from my perspective to our subject about belonging. Because Emmanuel and Femi, you mentioned about the ethical and moral obligation. Femi also mentioned about the profitability. Hasiba brilliantly with not ticking the boxes. And how can you see the value of the belonging in that? Because when you are ticking boxes, you are just bringing people in, right? You are just, how I like to say, you are putting a lot of different fishes in one aquarium, but are you guaranteeing that this aquarium has the proper environment? So where does belonging come in? And where do you see belonging in this conversation, in all these sentences that you all mentioned?
So let me take a stare on that. I have worked predominantly within the agile space in recent years, and I work with teams, I work with individuals, and I work with the leadership of an organization. One thing that is common is the trust equation that is built, and psychological safety, with where individuals within the team excel or do not excel. Now that now translates to the dynamics of a team, effective team performance, and what comes out of that is the quality of value that the customer receives. If we ship out poor quality products to customers as a result of lack of diversity and inclusion, customers will not buy the products or the services. And ultimately what will happen is that profitability will decline, and ultimately the business will collapse and end. So the significance of D&I is actually starts up from the individual level and rolls up from individual to teams to management to the entity, and then in the collaboration with customers. Everything has to be seamless, and they have to go hand in hand.
Just to echo what you've said there, Femi, I think you know, when you speak about everything going hand in hand, it's very much a mindset that needs to be you know, part of, that the company needs to adopt. I think you know, and it doesn't help to say, you know, it's only the individual's problem or opportunity or stance that one needs to take to better the situation. But, you know, the entire company, one needs to look at it from a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach, a middle-out approach. It's one of those things that really needs to be adopted, you know, in its entirety. And I find that, you know, there's two parts to this, I think, sometimes. Trying to maybe as a HR practitioner, trying to assist, you know, the company in adopting that mindset. And then from a talent acquisition side, bringing in individuals who possess the skills that we're looking for, but also aren't too similar to those who are looking for those skills, if that makes any sense. Bringing in individuals that, like you said, are different, that have different backgrounds, that can provide experiences to get that product that you spoke about, you know, into an area that only they probably know anything about, and whether it's viable or whatever the case is. And then more than that, you know, inclusion really is something that needs to be thought of and taken care of, because it ultimately plays a huge role in the retention rate of any company. You know, and so we talk about, you know, getting products to the right people, right places, but retention, you know, if employees, and I say employees because I think we're all too familiar with the term resources, and we're not understanding that these are individuals with experiences, with a voice. If they are able to take part in, you know, the company to provide value in their own right, or given that opportunity, you find that the retention rate is actually much better off going forward. And I think that alone provides massive value to a company.
Yeah, I loved what you said about the recruitment part and not fitting in, because the discussion on inclusion is looking for, to make it interesting, diversity interesting in a company is like recruiting for not fitting in, finding people who have something interesting, who bring pizzazz, because bringing people into your organization alters the culture of the organization per definition. And if you keep on hiring people who fit in, your culture is not evolving anymore, and you basically dead end somewhere. So bringing in that pizzazz of new people who bring something interesting, something unheard of or unseen in an organization, having the competences, of course, makes the journey more interesting.
Absolutely. I think 100%. I find that, you know, as human beings, we sort of subscribe to certain biases. You know, we're all familiar with the term birds of a feather flock together. And I've come across it many a times where we have a line manager or, you know, somebody who's part of the recruitment process that wants a specific type of person that looks to have somebody fit in, as you say. And you know, that should ultimately not be the aim. We shouldn't be looking for people to fit in. Absolutely. We should be looking for people who add value, who have different experiences, and you can provide those experiences, you know, or provide those in a meaningful way to uplift the company in some way or another. And that's really where inclusion starts, you know, is by finding the differences in people, bringing them in and having them provide, you know, their experience to take things forward. You know, so in many ways, one must tackle the biases of line managers. And I find, you know, you have to do that and engage in a bit of Socratic dialogue in which you challenge thoughts. You know, you have to clarify and ultimately act for change in so doing.
So just to add to that, Jared, thank you very much for that view. I'll just add one very small point. So we want a work environment that not only don't discriminate, if that double negative makes sense. So it's not okay to not just discriminate, but to also encourage openness about differences. So there is that full intent to actually make sure that openness about differences is promoted. And that ultimately makes sure that there's better collaboration between individuals within the organization, they work better, and they're a happier workforce, and then productivity increases as a result of that. Just to add to that.
And I also would like to add, yes, absolutely. And what I heard about line manager makes me think about the whole. What I often see in companies is that director levels are talking about inclusion, and they have an easy way of talking about it. And somewhere in the process, we always forget to take in the middle management. And in the end, they're the people making decisions about hiring or not. Because in the HR departments, usually people are pretty much into inclusive recruiting. But then you see the line managers and the team leaders who are actually not trained to really look for change and for interesting things. They're aimed at continuing the process. So basically reinforcing what is to make sure the process functions. And I think that they're key to making cultural change in the long run is working with middle management and get them on board first and foremost.
I think absolutely. I think you know it's a very difficult thing when you sort of met with that type of barrier. Like I said, it's a mindset, and part of our job, and not only as HR practitioners, but anybody within the company, is to promote some awareness, to assist in some form of training. We shouldn't ultimately be putting individuals in an interview room who don't have the skills to do so, or walk in with those biases, or you know, someone who doesn't have an open mind towards the continuation of a company in a different way other than what they've been used to for the last 20 years or so. So it's a very valid point.
And let me add something or question you something, because Manuel said about the middle management, and Jared brought about the top down, but how to involve these people, because from statistics and from data, we know that even middle management and the top management, they are homogeneous, right? So, and it's really hard normally from people to understand their own biases and their own privileges. So how to raise this awareness and how to embed, as Hasiba was saying, D&I into the culture, so that this becomes indeed everyone else's responsibility. It becomes a top-down approach. It becomes part of also the middle management. And Femi also mentioned about individual to teams, right? How to create this environment that people are not just fitting in, but they are indeed belonging to the company.
And
so can I just quickly add, sorry.
I was just going to say, and to add to that, not just the how can we, but are there specific trainings or methods around that?
Exactly.
That should be considered.
So I just wanted to quickly say that in terms of that top down, bottom up. So we've got top down, we've got bottom up, and we've got middle out. And you know, that middle out is probably one of the key aspects, because they are the interpretation layer, if I may call it that. They sit in between top down and bottom up, and they sometimes get caught because they don't actually translate what's happening properly. So, you know, if they are the middle management interfaces with the teams respectively, and then they're passing on a different message up to senior management, because senior management don't actually come down to the shop floor to see what's happening, get closer to what's going on. So middle management would need to be singled out for specific training. Now, organizationally, policies are probably one of the most important things that needs to be addressed. It's not good enough just to say we've got a policy that ensures equal opportunity. the big question is, how are those policies being manifested? What is being done to put those, you know, initiatives in place? Do we have mentorship to ensure that everyone has equal chances to get, you know, hands-on experience such that they can subsequently get promoted? So in my books, you know, organizational policy is one that they need to make sure that they reflect the diverse workforce. So things like the recruitment policies, things like the review policies, things like the hiring techniques, all of these needs to be, you know, shapen up and you know, polished up to reflect the D&I intent.
Yeah, but I'll amplify that actually. It's not, and I use different word than policies because policies feel very cold and distant. I use equity as the approach towards inclusion, and it's about developing that sense of equity within a company, and to review the processes and the procedures and everything we have. Are they being inclusive? Yes or no? And an example I use often. I had a chance of working at a certain point working with an organization that works on creating, you know, bringing panels together among other and speakers, lining them up for events. It's not this organization, it's different, different one. And at a certain point, we got into conversation, and they were like, you know, I always reach out whenever I see a panel or a panel with only men, or speakers line up with only men, and or 80% men. I always reach out because I find it very bizarre. And they're like, yeah, but men, we always get, you know, men always say yes. I'm like, of course, because they're men. Men say yes because they haven't got a clue what they're doing, and yes because they step into it and they'll see what things are happening. And then we discovered that the whole process they have is first come, first serve, which is typically favors masculine thinking or masculine behavior. If you say yes, immediately you get a spot. If you think, I'll think about what I'm going to say, then you lose your spot basically. So redesigning the whole process and redesigning the way of involving people or enrolling people into the system creates new opportunities and redesigns the process and the procedure. I think that's always, and there's no real one training for that or one solution for that, but it always starts with how is the process formed now, and is it equitable?
Manuel, with that, would you say that when you're putting this together, you do it very specifically to the organization and their internal needs?
Yes, absolutely. I think inclusion is about individuals. For me, inclusion is a conversation, and a conversation is between people. And there's some basic general lines of thinking, but in the end, it's about, you have to adapt it to the people who are there. What is within reach, and what's the first step we can take, whatever step that is.
Absolutely.
I like what you mentioned there. It's about people, and I've just had a squiz through the comments. You know, when we're dealing with people, we must understand that we have a goal in mind, and we hope to achieve that goal at some point, but we at the same time need to convince others that this goal is something that needs to be achieved. Someone mentioned earlier, you know, how do we do things without rocking the boat? You know, and my question is, why are we not rocking the boat?
Yeah.
You know, why is it something that we should walk on eggshells around or tiptoe around? You know, why should we avoid having those open, honest conversations when needed, to ensure that we can have things promoted like policies, you know, an equitable and fair environment, and those types of things. So really what I'm saying is it starts with those open, honest conversations that may inevitably rock the boat.
I just
go ahead.
Go ahead, Manuel.
I was just, and hopefully rock the boat, because if we're not rocking the boat, things will not change.
Absolutely.
And
Exactly.
then we just have a discussion, or not even a discussion, then we have a talk on diversity and inclusion. We have a nice management talk, very intellectual, but what's the point?
Amy
So
just mentioned a very, Sorry, Femi, you're welcome.
So I was just going to say rocking the boat. You know, I quite like that metaphor of, you know, the boat that's been cruising along steady for a number of years. And then all of a sudden, something happens that shifts the balance that everyone was comfortable with. And then, you know, we start adjusting, and that's the period of change. In that period of change, change has to be intentional. So we're not just changing because we want to be surviving. It has to be intentional, thoughtful. There must be a reason. What's the why behind the change? You know, we're not doing it just to tick the box, as you said earlier on, but this is something that we owe a moral obligation. We have an ethical duty. We have to ensure that, you know, everyone working together is going towards a common purpose. Sorry, Jared, you were going to say something.
I read an interesting comment in the chat function. Amy mentioned rocking the boat is good, but we need to empower people to do so and make it safe. Absolutely. I think empowerment is definitely something that we should strive towards in any organization. But I do find that given this topic and I think where we are right now in the world, and it doesn't matter where you are, it is a sensitive topic. It is something that individuals are to some extent fearful of you know, talking about, or if they, you know, or may fear, you know, rocking the boat in their own right. You find that a lot of people still feel afraid to mention these types of things, and we hope to promote an environment where they can talk about these things in a safe, open forum where they are able to do these things. But I think, you know, those who have the voice right now and are willing to do so need to stand up for those who don't, until we get to that point where we can actually promote empowerment, where they are able to do things on their own. You know, I do find that it might not be a popular opinion, but it is certainly something that I strive towards. But absolutely, empowering individuals to do those types of things is also high up on that priority list.
And I completely resonate with that. And I will also link with what Emmanuel said about seeing panels with only men. I was not aware of my own biases, as I assume most of us are not. And once I started this path into diversity and inclusion, I started studying about sexism and racism and all the biases. I took this implicit bias test from Harvard. And luckily for me, I would say I was biased towards women, because I put that it's a simple test from Harvard. You can do for gender, for ethnicity, for sexual orientation, whatever. And it's a binary test. And for instance, for the gender, the one that I took, it was basically physics, mathematics, and you needed to put whether it was addressed in your mind with women or men. And I was biased towards women. I put that women were 51% more to physics and mathematics than men, for example. And I was discussing with somebody from the Black community, and this person told me he took also the test, and he discovered himself as a racist. So what I mean about that is that not just we need to give the voices, but we will be able to give the voice and to empower people and to address our privileges once we are aware of our own biases. And all of us, we have them. It's not something that is my own, I have bias, you don't. We all have in one aspect or the other. And we can only rock the boat, I believe, when we start taking the paddles with us, instead of giving the responsibility to the others. And with that, I also resonate with what Manuel said. One of the things we started discussing when we started with this project of Hacking HR was like, we need to have diverse panels, because it makes me feel uncomfortable when I see panels nowadays that is only white, that it's only male, that it's only, or even only females, for example. We are 50% of the world of women, 50% is men. Then you have not just so mathematic, but you have non-binary population. How many Black people, how many white people, how many yellow people, how is that possible that we only have white cis male in the boards, in the panels?
That's probably one of the most challenging aspects that we encounter in the diversity and inclusion. And you know, I resonate with the point you made there about implicit biases. Not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, a number of people here, we were on a workshop on unconscious bias. So it's one thing for us to address our implicit biases because we are aware of them. But what about those that we don't have the consciousness of? So how do we address those ones? And how do we actually come to embrace that inclusiveness? It all requires a lot of collaboration and openness of mind, challenging behaviors, you know, having those cultural mindset shifts, you know, having a growth mindset. I don't think there are any questionnaires or studies you can undertake to actually help you uncover your unconscious biases. It's down to the individual doing a reflection, you know, those private moments where individuals actually look inward, look in the mirror. What do you see? And then, you know, reflect what you see back to yourself, and then you get an understanding of your unconscious biases.
I don't mean to cut this off too much here, but we did have a question that I missed a bit earlier for the alternate word that Emmanuel uses for policies.
Oh yeah. What I use words like practices, habits, or the way we do things. Because to have a conversation, to have a change, for me, you have to bring it to the people and create a sense of ownership. When you talk about policies and procedures, it's like when you talk to me about policies and procedures in my organization, like that's not my problem, you know. Somebody said that's the policy, and then, you know, I'll do that because that's what I get paid for. When it's about my practice and the way I do things and our ways of doing things, then I have impact on that because I belong to that. And it's looking for that kind of, because a lot of inclusion and the road towards inclusion, part of that road is about language. It's semantics. It's getting the words right. When pronouns are important, you ask people's pronouns. And when you know the pronoun of a person, you use that pronoun, whatever it is. And yes, it's hard. It's damn hard. But that's sort of respect for the other person. And that's about being interested in the other person and finding out ways that connect to each other is more important than using words that are outside of us. It's the other. A policy is the other. It's somebody else does that. And that's kind of like the flavor of it.
Really well. I love that. I love the conversation around instead of policy, saying habits, practices, because when we define it to policy, we go back to that numbers. It's our policy to be inclusive. So we have X percentage of women and X percentage of disabled persons, but it's not really breeding in the belonging across that. And we have something to add here, which could maybe draw from that, and it's continuing on the unconscious biases. So how can having these honest conversations around how we use the words, terminologies, pronouns be more enlightening to what our biases are? Do we need this test, or is it more of learning how to discuss with one another?
Can I provide some views on that? So yeah. I'm just going to go through some values that, you know, we expect to be in place. So commitment, having cultivating a diverse and inclusive workforce takes time, and it takes a lot of energy. If there's no commitment, it will not happen. So having a D&I strategy or initiative in place requires a lot of effort, and people have to be committed to ensure that they work on it to get it right. It's not ticking the box, it's a mindset shift. Now, secondly, there's an element of courage. People should not be afraid to challenge organizational attitudes when they see it. If we see something that doesn't align with the values that we are trying to promote, we should just have those conversations so that the projection of that attitude or behavior can be challenged there and then, and let the individual reflect upon it and then consider alternative ways that they can manifest their behavior. In terms of recognition of bias, I don't know how much more to put it other than to say that each and every one of us should just identify our own biases, and we now have to come up with ways to prevent them from, having detrimental impacts within our environments. Now, we also need to generate a level of curiosity within ourselves. We have to be open-minded. We need to have a desire for exposure to different ideas, different cultures, different differences. Let me put it that way. What's different? We shouldn't look at differences as negative. We should look at it and say, right, that's different. The difference in it, what do I need to do to embrace it? Now, I think lastly, I would talk about cultural intelligence. Earlier on, we talked about fitting in. Some people only feel comfortable when they're in their familiar surroundings, when there's something that they can reasonably identify with, without making an effort to actually go through an acculturation process to identify what's different from that I don't have. How can I tap into that to broaden my knowledge and actually make sure that my biases are eradicated? So those are just some points that I wanted to add there.
Fantastic. And I think the more we become aware, the more we put in terminology around how an organization should be approaching diversity and inclusion and belonging, the more we can get into kind of the core of, at the end of the day, we can only get companies to do this if they define the value. So with all of your guys' experiences and knowledges on board, how do we bring this together to derive value from D&I for the companies? That's not checking a box.
From my experience is, and I resonate about with what Femi said, is about involving people. So we are having companies now that they have not just a diversity and inclusion strategy for internally, but also for all the stakeholders chain. So if I want to sign a contract with the company X, I need to prove that in my board, I have gender diversity, I have race diversity. And Goldman Sachs, I think, did that. They are not doing IPOs for companies that don't have X gender in their board. And again, is the ticking the box, but until what point this is bad? I think we need to start somewhere. And I completely resonate with what Femi said about the curiosity, being curious and not just respecting, but being curious about who is different than me, who is different than my beliefs, who is different than my ethnicity is really relevant. And in that path, I believe we can involve everyone and then derive the value of diversity and inclusion. Because what normally happens in the companies is that diverse teams, they are in the short term more conflictuous than homogeneous teams. So companies tend to take more time to see the value. So how to pass this barrier, how to generate the innovation and the harmony that diversity values drive after some point. So for me, it's about involving everyone, and then it goes also with the belonging part. And for that, we need also to have inclusiveness cultures. But I believe that it comes to all of us. So I have one story, for example. I was discussing with a colleague that is a Muslim, and it was the first time I had a colleague Muslim. And I was asking her, what would be something that for you would make a difference on your day as a Muslim? And she said, having a prayers room. And for me, I would never think about that. I have been born and raised Catholic, even though I'm not a practitioner, but still. And it was so simple. It's so interesting to listen. So for me, it goes with the curiosity and the deriving value. It's about involving everyone. When people gets involved, when the society sees the value, it's our society. I mean, I think it's in the US, 85% of the consumers are females. So how does a company with only male are going to know what women need? So it's about also representation of my consumer. This for me is the value, and this is for me the value of the business as well. I don't know what Jared and Emmanuel.
It's very interesting. We talk about, you know, evolving company or evolving a mindset, you know, and I think I read a comment now earlier, you need to break down an organization's culture. A lot of issues are around systematic structures within the culture. And I think, you know, sometimes, and perhaps progressively so, revolution is better than evolution, you know, and I don't mean that in its entirety. So don't take my words to heart there, but I think sometimes a shock to the system must occur before that evolution can begin, before that mindset can change. And how do we then start that process? How do we usher in a new age, put it that way? You know, and yes, I think it starts with the individual, and one must remember that we need to advocate for change. We need to be agents of change. We need to ensure that through everything we do, be it, you know, the honest conversations, recognizing our own biases, we do it with integrity, and we ensure that we promote the inclusive organization that we truly want. But it does start with the individual and being able to have those conversations, to broaden the horizons of those around us, our line managers, our stakeholders, whatever the case is. You know, so it's very much being able to advocate for that change, to be that agent for change, whatever that means for you.
Yeah.
The next, oh, please go.
No, sorry. Yeah, no, I was just thinking, because when I started, what's the end value or the end game of diversity and inclusion? Or how do you bring that about? It's like such a big thing, you know. And the ideal or the easiest way of doing it is get a new CEO. Because yeah, but no, but in the end, that's the ideal turning point. When you get a new CEO in, that person will change culture fundamentally, or has the opportunity to change culture fundamentally. And inclusion will work when you put it central in your strategy. You can talk about diversity, and the business case of diversity has been made ages ago already. So it's easy to calculate, and diverse teams are more effective or tend to make better quality decisions than non-diverse teams, provided that they're inclusively managed. Because if you badly manage them, they make actually worse decisions. So, you know, it's a complex discussion. So that one thing is the big thing. Let's change the whole culture of the company. Yeah. There's also, at the same time, and it goes together in part, a starting point is about grassroots activity. It's about teams and leaders and small business units, or that start playing with what is inclusion. How can we do the business different within the realm of what we can control? And that's about role. That Sven mentioned something about role modeling, because that's about it. You have to role model. It's like, this is the way we can do it too. But then you need people who champion that. You need one or two activists, and every company has activists within them, so they're always there. You need to empower them, empower them, and give them some kick in the butt, and then the grassroots movement is important. I think for HR, it's an important role just to see and to sense within the organization where are these activities that can change on the ground level, because oftentimes diversity inclusion discussions are top level discussions, because the other side, and that's a side we seldom talk about in we talk about diversity inclusion, which is nice, the shiny part of it. The backside of that is discrimination, because in the end that's what people are experiencing. They're experiencing discrimination, and they don't want to be discriminated upon. So that's the evil side of diversity, and that's a different discussion, but as important. And somewhere we have to bring that together. I think that's the. And what I notice when I talk to clients, when they become aware that discrimination happens within their own organization, things mentally can change. It opens up something, because generally people do not want an organization where discrimination happens.
So I'm just curious about, I want to roll back a couple of steps to when we talked about D&I strategy, having it in place within the organization, and making sure that everyone adheres to that policy or to the strategy or the initiative. I'm curious about people's, experience with measurement techniques. So we have a strategy in place. Then what?
I think you guys bring everything together of the direction that we're going really nicely. So we bring people together, we have these conversations, but what organizational culture do you really need in order to harness the full value of D&I? And Emmanuel was touching on that when they were discussing the importance of the inclusion in developing the culture, but what does that look like?
Can I pick on that, please? Because that dovetails back to the question I just asked there. In recent times, we've heard of something called CVE. Is that something that we're familiar with? CVE is culture, value, and ethics statements. And a lot of companies, especially after George Floyd, came up with CVE statements. Mm-hmm. And we saw it left, right, center, up and down, north, west, south, and east. Everyone came out with CVE statements. The reality of CVE statements is that a lot of companies put out these statements to say, I'm not a racist.
Yeah.
But not many companies put out an intentional statement to say, I am anti-racist. Yeah. I stand by my values, and my values mean that I do not advocate or support any form of racism. Or I mean, I'm using race here as an example. There's so many other ways of diversity and inclusion. So race is just, just an example. So there's a book that was written by Ibram X. Kendi that says how to be an anti-racist. Yeah. A lot of people would say, oh, I'm not racist. And that exonerates them in their own mind. But we need people to go as far as saying, I am anti-racist, which means it's a totally different definition. And until that behavior is ingrained in our minds, we're not really going to have those CVE statements having a big impact. So there you have it.
I will take the chance, because I watched recently a TED Talk from Verna Myers, and she was exactly pointing that out, saying that many people say I'm not racist, but then she mentioned she was walking down the street with a colleague, and there was a black guy on the other side, and they were lost apparently, I think, and she immediately walked towards the person. She is a black woman, and her friend, who says I'm not racist, the first thought she had is, I need to go to the other side. And she said, oh my God, I work with diversity and inclusion, I work with you, and I have been racist right now. So, and this is exactly the point, to become aware. And just going back to the question about the culture, and something that is Van put in the chat, that there is the company's culture and there are subcultures. So, and I completely agree with Emmanuel, that is a whole change. It's not just to say, here is my D&I strategy and that's it. You need to change the whole structure, but also maybe we're talking about companies who have D&I in their veins, in their blood, but they have subcultures because it's not involved or is not involving everyone, right? So how to have an organizational culture that that embraces diversity and inclusion into each and every person? That's for me the 1 million question.
Well,
and yeah, and that's it for me. It's about involving everyone. It's about each and every one of us being aware and curious and embracing.
As a listener, can I jump in?
Yes, of course.
Okay, well, I want to thank the panelists, first of all. This is very good. It's truly very good. I'm very fortunate. I work for a global organization, and I literally go around the world every day. I start in the Pacific Islands and work my way through Europe into the US and then back to Japan at the end of every day. You know, these are things that my organization faces every single day. We are diverse, okay, by our very nature. Because we're global, we're very, very diverse. And we have a lot of those subcultural issues. What we have found is that more often than not, those subcultural issues are more tied to ignorance, for lack of a better word. You know, and that lack of curiosity, right? For example, I have an employee from Mexico working with an employee in the Pacific Islands. In the Pacific Islands, the culture is very matriarchal, and they are less aggressive and, you know, more tell me exactly what to do and I'll do it exactly the way you tell me to do it and no more. And versus a Latin American male who's very dominant and works with commands and gives commands. And so the Pacific Islanders are receiving that message and going, wow, he's an angry person. Not very nice. And that's absolutely not the scenario at all. So trying to teach the different subcultures about one another is our challenge right now. Because we have a lack of inclusion that is directly tied to that ignorance. It's just not understanding that the way this person communicates, or the way this culture communicates rather, and the way this culture communicates are disconnected. And as we find a way to educate them on that very aspect, it improves. But how we do that is a real challenge for us. You know, workshops are nice, but we find people don't speak up. They don't talk during a workshop. Everybody is afraid of saying the wrong thing. So that's our challenge today, is how do we begin that inclusionary process through an understanding of the cultural differences that may occur. And I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
No, thanks, Lisa. I'm just going to take it. I got inspired because I worked on a project, something similar project, similar company and situation, and what we developed with them is or they developed. I'm just the consultant there. What we developed is kind of like a card system, but 3 things you need to know about me, 3 things that will help communicating with me. And so every culture, they kind of like define their own cultures, and the relationship between how my culture sees your culture for all the different cultures in the company. And then they came up with a whole system of what we need to know from each other to understand. So an example you say would be something like, you know, when you come from country X, chances are you will be, or chances are that you will be direct in your communication. Well, I come from, I don't know, Pacific, where time is very flexible for me, which means I'm still on time, even if I'm too late for you. Those kind of things. So it became a conversation. I think it's what I find important always is trying to figure out how can I help conversation going. So what do you need to know about me as an individual or as a group, and what would be three interesting questions you can ask me to get a conversation starting.
I
That
love
was
that. That's a beautiful icebreaker for a meeting, even.
Yeah, and one of the things we noticed in meetings is exactly that people, you oftentimes people come to a meeting to do stuff, and when you come from different cultures, you are a lot of things also which are not known, and sometimes you have to be stuff before you can do stuff, and that kind of settles it. It's like the check-in in deep democracy or participative management, uh, creating something that you can ask me about my culture, or that makes an interesting starting point.
I
Just my
really
idea.
like that as well versus making the assumptions, the three things to know. And I can think of places where this would have helped me along my way many times, especially because I've now worked globally for 4 years in many different diverse organizations. And when we go to the question on the what kind of culture do you need to have to derive the value from diversity and inclusion? Some of the key things I heard you guys point out, Emmanuel, you were saying you need to empower the change makers in the organization. And Femi, you were saying you need to break down the walls and just not even have them. And so I'd be really curious also, Jared, from what you have seen, what, especially in the circumstances that South Africa has faced in recent years, how do they foster this inclusion to stimulate these conversations?
It's a very difficult one. So, I mean, we spoke about things like policies and legislations, and so for us in SA, like I've said, we've got the Employment Equity Act, which governs that as legislation that says we need to hire X, Y, and Z. And again, it takes us back to the tick boxes. So we're bringing in the right individual in terms of, you know, when we look at it from a diversity point of view, but we're not focusing on the inclusion aspect. So when we're talking about, you know, the culture that one needs to breed, that one needs to ultimately build, you know, we need to understand that, you know, meeting the quota does not equal inclusion. And then it again comes down to awareness. So understanding oneself, and then also having, you know, the employees or the leaders in the company understand their role. And I think that's typically where you know, the culture shift needs to occur as well. For me, you know, we've seen that it's a difficult thing, of course, but we're dealing with a human being. And this is the difference, is that we're speaking about all of these constructs. We're speaking about, you know, the differences between individuals, you know, and sometimes we don't always focus on the similarities, especially when promoting culture or trying to change, you know, promote a shift in culture within a company. And you know, things like promoting empathy when it comes to dealing with the leaders, or stakeholders or managers or whatever the case is, whomever you're dealing with is of, you know, utmost importance. You need to understand that it is an individual that you can connect with in some way or another. And we need to ensure that we promote empathy throughout the company. And I find that in the companies that I have not, or sorry, that I've serviced in my time, there has been more of a shift to complete or to bring in the diversity, to tick those boxes, but not include the individuals or change the culture. There has been no empathy. There has been no drive to dealing with an individual, a person with feelings, contributions, experiences, and whatever the case is. It has been simply to bring in a resource to do a job. And now we need a resource that is of a certain color, a certain sex, a certain whatever to do that job, but we have still not taken into account that this is an individual, somebody with their own individual experiences. We lack empathy And in many companies, they lack empathy. And so for me, that has been the difficulty. That has been the difference. It has been extremely difficult to promote that, to break through to those individuals, even though it can be done. It takes time, like Femi alluded to earlier. It is something that will happen over time, but it is about promoting that empathy. And Lisa mentioned, the workshops, and I find that, she mentioned the word ignorance, and yes, absolutely. And it goes hand in hand with somebody who has no empathy. And sometimes we need to promote that aspect of being a human being, and in so doing could potentially change the overall arching constructs that prevent us from having an inclusive culture.
It does sound as if Gerard and I have been reading the same books, because I just resonate with a lot of the keywords that we've got there. Empathy, the automation of inclusion does not necessarily mean that they've got it right. I've just dropped a couple of points in chat there about the fact that inclusion is not something that we get a strategy put in place, tick the box, yes, we've got it, or get a senior leader to go on a training course and they come back and say, yeah, I've got the certificate, I've done it. I'm certified on inclusion. It's not one-off, it's something that we do on an ongoing basis. We also mentioned something earlier on, I put in chat about how we maximize joy and connection, how we foster collaboration and make sure that people are now able to work together. But there's one additional point that I want to make. I might have talked about psychological safety earlier on. We could have all the inclusion initiatives within the organization, and still the individual still has an element of fear. So it's very important that the environment, the inclusive environment that is created, is one that actually minimizes fear. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, how do we do that actually? How do we take fear away? Yeah, it's all about the psychological safety, the emotional quotient, the individual, how they feel, that they have a level of trust when they collaborate with people, such that when they're not with them, they have that confidence that they're not being undermined, that stories are not being said behind them. So all of these actually contribute towards the emotional quotient of the person, so that they feel strong and they feel included. We could spend all day talking about this, but
Well, I think it very well. I mean, we've covered so many deep topics, but then it's really how can the leaders in the organization role model this behavior? And you've touched on it with empathy. But what can the leaders do to ensure that that diversity and inclusion isn't a one-off training of, oh, by the way, this is my DISC personality, so this is how you interact with your colleagues that are a C, a D, and an I. How do they embody that into the culture?
I'm going to drop one word. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just still a little bit. I'm going to get to the leadership part, and at the same time, I'm going to solve it. I want to add to the bit of culture, because it's easy to say what kind of culture do we need, but we have to understand what culture is all about. Culture is the being of all the individuals in an organization. To change culture, basically you hire and you promote for culture. If you want to change culture, you have to hire people fitting a new culture, or that bring in something that will change the culture in a certain direction, and promote those kind of beings and behaviors that you want in your culture. Oftentimes, a lot of companies still work on a merit-based system, which tends to favor people who are lucky.
Yeah.
They don't go for competence, nothing basically, except just having luck in being in the right place in the right time. If you start promoting, and that's leadership thing, getting that guideline out, promoting for empathy, or promoting for human kindness, or humaneness, or warmth, then the culture will evolve in that direction automatically, because that gets stimulated. And you have to hire new people, because when you have an older culture or a culture within a certain setting, you don't change overnight. You have to get new people in with, and new people will change the culture as such. So yeah, role modeling as a leader is important, and working on the equity, because the equity, that's where the equity happens.
So just to add to the role modeling of leadership, so there are a million and one things that organizations could do. But, you know, in my mind, when I've led some organizations and guided them and provided some, you know, assistance, we talk about things like creating mentorship programs. You know, this is a key component of workplace diversity programs, just to ensure that opportunities become freely available on an equal basis. By default, some individuals, some groups don't have access to certain jobs because they've never had the opportunity to actually try it out. But by going on a mentorship program, that gives them that chance to actually say, right, okay, a 6-month assignment will give them that opportunity to try it out. And then from there, I can build on the experience that I need to go up on the hierarchy of the organization. But in order for that to work, managers need to be educated, not to now look at a mentee as a temporary resource or a temporary person who's just there to get some experience for 6 months and go away. No, they are there and they've got to do valid work like everyone else does.
Creating a environment that allows the interns or mentees to actually develop experience.
Yes.
I think that's crucial across the boards.
Absolutely.
And it's crucial for new employees as well. And it will train the leaders on the behaviors they want to have the company embody. I think, Emmanuel, you had something?
Did I have something?
I don't know.
No, I wanted to add something because for me it goes with communication and what Jared and Femi were saying about empathy. But then again, this is the individual, and companies don't train that because this is not profitable scene. So as leaders, they have the chance to change this mindset, as we were discussing also about mindset before. And to role model, I think Lisa put in the chat about role modeling. So for me as a leader, I have to mentor, like Femi said. If I am a woman and I am in a leadership position, what can I do to promote an inclusive environment? And this means sponsor people, coach people, mentor people. Because what we see the most, and we are starting to have also researchers on that, is, for example, women in leadership positions or women towards other women, they're way more critical than men towards women. I was reading about a research they did in the US, I think, with ecologists. There were 2 teachers. It was mainly the same person, but it was virtual. One had a known male name and the other teacher had a known female name. And the feedbacks, even though it was exactly the same person, was way more critical towards the women, even though it was exactly the same person. And the criticism, the toughest criticism were coming from the female students. So, and this I think goes with our own biases as well. But as leaders, we need to see our own biases. And somebody, I think Kartik put about vulnerability. It's about also a culture shift, that vulnerability is not a weakness. To become a trustworthy leader, it's more profitable. First, the companies will have teams that will be retained, that will be more, they will belong more, they will feel they belong, and they will be more productive. But sometimes, I don't know your feeling, but for me, it seems that we all know about that for ages. But for some reason, the boat is still in the comfort zone. But for me, it's about communication. It's empathy. It's vulnerability. It's role modeling. If I want to have a more inclusive and diversity environment, I need to promote that.
And
yeah, I agree with that, Dennis.
I like what Tatiana has said here, where perhaps we shouldn't ask what culture we want, but what culture we have today. And it plays off quite interestingly from the day that I've had where we did a participation around a grow model focused on the culture that we're working with in terms of changing to have a more technologically advanced. And we can find what is working in the current structure to improve it for the future, right? Because it is a process, but what we have today, there is still those good pieces in there. But with 10 minutes left, I would love to ask if anyone in the audience has any questions. We've covered our key points that we were looking for today. And is there's somebody that's just itching to ask something? Coming up. Is it just Jared?
Sorry, I just turned my light on there.
Jerome put a question.
Why are some people more critical with those that are the same minority pool as them? This is a great question.
Ask them. I don't know. I think the way to figure it out is to ask them, because that's the conversation that starts again.
If they even are aware that.
Yeah.
God knows, yeah.
I think we need 3 more hours. I agree.
This is Jerome. I just came on. So just to add to that, I mean,
Jerome is really far.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me get my headset and hopefully you'll hear me while I get connected. And I think why some people are more critical of those that are in the same minority pool as them is because they know the environment that they're gonna go into. And to actually bring someone in that they're not being real critical with would not be a true situation for success for that person. Because if it's gonna be a difficult environment, you don't want to just put someone in that environment to have another LGBTQ person or another female or another Black person. And I see the point of being critical, and maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong lens. So, I'll throw it out there and see what other thoughts are on it. I mean, from the panel members.
I can add some value. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I can add a bit of value. I think there are quite a few different perspectives to look at it. Sometimes, I mean, just to keep it simple, Femi said one key word: psychological safety. Sometimes you're coming into a pool where you're not really sure of who the people around are, and you just feel safe, close to home in that little circle that you are. So again, I think, without us being conscious or unconscious, we have to let everybody feel safe. I mean, that's safe, even though you don't want to bring somebody into your circle, it's because maybe you don't want them to know something about you in your circle, and at the same time, vice versa. So I think that psychological safety word is really, really key to us as individuals, just to be able to work with people naturally. I think that's, again, just, levitating towards what Gerard said earlier on. I really resonated with that, and Tangent, what she said was, or sorry, apologies if not a she, but what was said just resonated to me, that psychological safety is something we have to be conscious of. We almost have to wear it like a sleeve, or we just have to have that empathy with us, and it should be one of the keys that we put in front of us. I wouldn't say anymore before I get too emotional.
Thank you so much, Aguala. For those, well, some people may know Aguala. Him and I run our agile practice together, so our thoughts are always aligned. We differ sometimes, and we have healthy conversations to align thoughts, and that's a story that I wish managers and leadership could actually, tap into, to actually have those conversations, find out where the misalignment is, then find out why we differ in thoughts, right? How can we get to the convergence zone? What actions do we now need to put in place? What monitoring do we need to have there to ensure that what we've agreed, it just doesn't stay there for today, but on a continuous basis, we are revisiting, we are addressing, we are adapting to changes as we go along. As Tatiana mentioned earlier on about culture, for me, I look at culture as shifting almost on a minute basis. You blink and the culture's shape is changed. So we've got to be on our toes to constantly identify what's the trigger for those changes, how are we going to respond to them, and what we're going to do to make sure that when we look at the whole person, we're not leaving them aside, we're actually carrying everyone together as we go along. We could spend the next 5 days on this workshop, and it's such an interesting aspect of our daily lives, and I'm just so happy to be here.
I mean, maybe we'll have to do a master class on this in 2021. But from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank all of our panelists and the time that you've taken to be with us. I think it's been a phenomenal conversation. With just 4 minutes left, and Femi, we can start with you because you're on the screen. What is the message you want to leave with the audience today?
Right. I'm just going to break this down into just sort of 3 separate points, but I'm not going to elaborate too much on them. First of all, focus on the people, not just products, services, or the organization's bottom line. The people are key. Now, this is a mantra. Don't just think it. Embrace it. Do it. And live by it. And thirdly, treat employees as whole people. We've got to make sure that we do this by ensuring all employees, and I put all in caps, all employees feel they belong. And that's me.
Thank you. Jared?
I think that's a tough act to follow, but I mean, Femi said it quite nicely. Definitely treat all employees as people, concentrate on the people. I think what I'd like to say is really do not be afraid to rock the boat, especially when it comes to, the conversations like this. Have those honest, open conversations. Be an agent for change. And go forward and try to promote the change that you hope to see one day.
Excellent. And Emmanuel?
I'm gonna work on that. Well, no, but the key takeaway for me is always, inclusion is a conversation. It's a natural thing, and having the conversation, that's where it starts. Inclusion is not about big strategy, and it is also about big strategy and everything, but that's not the essence. It's not about changing the world today or tomorrow. It's about having one conversation, not more than that. And never forget, you are the leader. We are all leaders. So we have to role model this. If we are not role modeling this, nobody will. So when we role model and we have the conversation, things will spread out automatically.
Amazing. Love it. We still have 2 minutes. Anything anyone wants to add? Just so happy. I'm bursting with happiness. I could cry here. This has been phenomenal. I am beyond happy. Thank you, everyone.
Also, I would like to thank, and just going back to Junior put in the chat, what would be the step one? Just do it. This is the step one. It's everyone's task to be curious, to be kind, to be curious, to understand, to have empathy when communicating something. I think this is the step one, is to understand that we are all vulnerable. We all have our biases, but we are not monsters for that. We can work on that, and we can become better professionals besides human beings. And it was beyond pleasure to be with, well, Hasiba. She had a problem in the middle, but the three of you were just marvelous. And we have, I think Minala is going to give this last message about December.
Yes, Minala.
I don't want to be the one bringing the best line of 2020 with your on mute, but I almost done it. So thank you very much, everyone. This has been beyond. And I do enjoy coming to Hacking HR as a participant, so I'm looking forward to many returns in this capacity. Thank you very much to all speakers. Thank you very much to Alison and Patricia, and thank you very much to everyone here today. I wouldn't have spent my afternoon with anyone else. I hope that we can welcome you again on December the 9th, the same time slot, 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's gonna be a very festive, very open, hop on, hop off event. It's gonna be about, thank goodness 2020 is over. Make sure you bring your key takeaways from this roller coaster year. Make sure you have something orange with you. It can be a t-shirt, an orange, an Aperol Spritz, watch, whatever. Just giving you heads up that starting January 20th next year, we have every third Wednesday booked for Hacking HR Luxembourg and Friends from now on. We have 6, 7-ish events already lined up. As I mentioned in the beginning, diversity and inclusion is very much part of who we are as a community, and we stand by it through any topic that we choose to open up to our community members. So for next year, we will have employee experience and employee engagement. We have a little bit of mental health and well-being, change and innovation, and many, many more. Please feel free to reach out to myself, to Alison, to Patricia. Check out hackinghr.io. You can check for the chapters closest to you geographically. Stay tuned, follow us on LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure, it's been a joy, it's been just wonderful. And yes, Alison, with I almost cried, you kind of stole my line. But we can have a very inclusive, emotional.
As we say goodbye, maybe we could keep the panelists just for 2 more minutes once everyone's but we won't keep you too long. But thank you for everyone. Really.
See you in December.